Hi, and welcome to this episode of Filmi Ladies. I'm Pitu, and along with me is my wonderful co host Beth. And also today we're joined by our amazing longtime friend Luncheroni. She's going to be our guest today. And when I tell you this anecdote about Luncheroni, you will understand what the topic of today's chat is. So, a few months ago, almost 6 or 7 months ago, when Beth and I were kind of thinking of starting a podcast, but we didn't have a name yet. We didn't know where we were going to do it. We knew it was going to be on films, but it was mostly up in the air. And I shared this news with Luncheroni. And I said, hey, Beth and I are going to start this podcast. It's going to be on films. She immediately enthusiastically sent me this long response, and it was all caps. And she said, Madam, you have to do an episode on vamps. And there were like 5 exclamation marks. And I was like, of course you would say that, Luncheroni, because Luncheroni's display picture for the last however long I've known her has always been Saint Helen, whom we all believe in. And so I was like, of course she would tell us to do a Vamps episode. So we're finally getting around to it, and we're very excited. And so first I'm going to welcome Luncheroni to our wonderful show. And Lunchy, I have to ask you, what is this obsession you have with Vamps?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different sources, but I think it's I'm also like very into drag, very like discovering John Waters as a kid, just like exaggerated femininity, campiness, but also like there's some earnesty, is that a word? They're earnest. It's not ironic, yet it's ironic. So it's just this perfect mixture for me to like project my own, neuroses and desires onto. So I love it. And just glamour.
I'm so glad you said drag, because for the last several years, my museum did an exhibit on drag costuming a couple of years ago. And ever since then, I've been thinking about how item girls are like the drag queens of Hindi cinema, maybe. I don't know enough about drag to say, but I feel like there's some connections there. And I was talking with our mutual friend, Abe Goldfarb, on Twitter, who works in burlesque in New York and knows all sorts of cool things. And so I was talking to him about this. He's like, oh yeah, we got to explore that somehow. Cause like, I think that's a thing. It's this exaggerated
camp
desire, version of womanhood, camp, glamour, like you said, earnest yet ironic, lots of imagining different selves, like it has everything.
Honestly, it's just fun. I mean, none of us get to dress like that ever. I mean, we go to work being all like professional. We don't wear feathers and like bling and sequins. I wish we did, but we don't. So it's just kind of fun, isn't it? Like, I was not having a very happy day today. And as part of my homework, I revisited all of our favorite like cabaret songs with like Helen and Bindu and Aruna Irani and all of these people. And honestly, it was such a mood lifter. I mean, how can you be in a bad mood after you watch Helen shimmying to, Mehbooba around a fire and like heaving bosoms and hip thrusts? It's just so glam and wonderful.
Exactly.
Everybody on this call, if you were a Bollywood vamp, or not even Bollywood, other industries too, which vamp are you? Who would you be?
I know who I am.
Who are you, Pitu?
I am Bindu.
Yay!
Wow.
So here's the thing. I clearly have spent a lot of time thinking about this, because I was saying to my husband, and he was just kind of like just going, huh, what? I realized that all vamps are not created equal. Because if you look at Helen, for instance, she does all these gorgeous numbers. She's extremely beautiful. She's very graceful, but she also falls sort of into that trope of like the girl with like a golden heart, like even when she's the gangster's mall, or even like there's always a reason for why she's doing what she's doing. And she's always like this. She's a good girl, really. And then when you look at Aruna Irani, she's always a little bit manic pixie-ish, and she's very Indian, very earthy. She's always in Ghagra choli. She rarely does cabarets the way Helen did. It was more like she's like a gypsy girl, or stuff like that. And frequently in her movies, like in Karwan, for instance, she's in love with the hero and she can't have him for whatever reason. So she's trying with all her feminine wiles to get him. But again, she's not mean or bad or evil in any way. She just wants the guy. And when she realizes he's not into her, she kind of like is like okay with it. Bindu is truly bad.
Nice.
Bindu does not care. Bindu is not in it for the man. She's not in it for the dance. She's not in it for the glory. She's just being bad because it's fun to be wicked. So I was watching her song, and it is my number one favorite cabaret song of all time. It's Mera Naam Hai Shabnam. Pyar se log mujhe Shabbo kehte hain.
Yeah.
She's so vile in it. Like, she's laughing and ridiculing and mocking Asha Parekh the whole time, and she's just reveling in her badness, and she never apologizes or makes any excuses for it. And she continued that through her senior years. Like, she literally played not a femme fatale anymore, but she played like this older mean auntie in like the Rajashri movies, for instance, where she was no longer like hot or whatever, but she was still like, she was just wicked. So I identify with Bindu.
Wow, I love it.
That's amazing. How about you,
I know
Lunchy?
both of you are reconsidering your friendship with me now.
No. Bindu's great.
I need to rewatch that song again. Very familiar with the song. I mean, I'm Helen is like holds the key to my heart. I mean, I'm not Helen at all, but I did my 30th birthday. I threw a Bollywood themed birthday party, and I recreated, as to the best of my ability, like the outfit from her dance in Jewel Thief. Did the whole thing. So
that is hardcore.
Yeah, she's just it's just because I think it's that line, like what you're saying, like, I'm not the heart of gold thing, but she just, it's campy, and it's light, and it's fun. There's abandon and fervor, and I, that's what I would like to. It's the opposite of who I am, so it's a nice escape.
Helen, like for years and years, I've been referring to Helen as a deity. I'll be like, Helen above, can we please get our act together or whatever? Because I don't believe in anything, actually, but I was like, you got to refer to somebody sometimes, and if you need a higher power, I feel like Helen is it.
It's appropriate.
My favorite, despite what Pitu has just said, is probably Aruna Irani. Like, that whole, like, she's got a little bit of the, like, not quite lovable loser, but sort of like you're saying, like, she never gets the guy. She often gets killed. I mean, I think a lot of them do, but I feel like I've seen her take the bullet for the hero more than I've seen some of the others. And there's something sort of like, not doofy little sister, but something kind of like that I respond to. And I don't think that's my actual persona, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, Aruna Irani, I got you, girl. And there's I believe multiple movies where she is in love with Shashi Kapoor, and I'm like, yeah, relatable.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
And there's even a movie where she's like, there's a movie where she refers to him and is like, he looks just like the film star Shashi Kapoor, and she's like, woo, and you're like,
yeah, she was definitely very like lovable and sweet. And you can see that even in her dance numbers, where it's like she's not as polished, I would say, as Helen was. I mean, Helen's dancing was just like out of this world crazy. Like, I really deep dived into all of those like old numbers between yesterday and today, and it was just, she's so polished, because when you're watching like a Bindu song, and then it's a Helen song, and then an Arunari song, and then a Helen song again, her movement, her body language, her expressions, she's just elastic.
She's the best dancer of them all.
She's
right?
A phenomenal dancer.
I mean, so we haven't talked about Bella Bose, who I quite enjoy. She's not as much a vamp, I guess, as maybe like a secondary character, but she's an excellent dancer for item numbers and cabaret songs. I love Lakshmi Chaya. She's phenomenal. Jayashree T and her sister Meena are both really good.
There's Kalpana Iyer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and of course, then there's people like, who are less I associate with dancing, like we have to talk about Nadira.
Yes.
In terms of like woman villain versus sexy dancer,
right.
I saw this list that put Lalita Pawar on the list of vamps, and I was like, I don't think of her as a vamp, I just think of her as a villain, because
some of these lists are a little whack. I was doing like a little research, and I'm like,
a woman villain is not necessarily a vamp. And I have not seen her very early stuff, so maybe I'm talking incorrectly here, but you have to be sexy to be a vamp, in some form or other.
So I actually Googled it because I was like, I know we keep saying vamp, 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 but what does that even mean? And apparently it comes from the French word for femme fatale. So it
Sure.
basically just means like a deadly woman. And in some people basically use vamp as short for vampire, not in the traditional like blood-sucking undead sense, but basically just a femme fatale, someone who, leads men to their doom and, stuff like that. So to Beth's point, there has to be that like sex appeal. Otherwise you're just a female villain. But I think that's why the vamp was always like someone who was very sexy and beautiful and used her sort of feminine wiles in stark opposition to the heroine, who was a lot of times really boring and vanilla and just kind of like put you to sleep because she was this sort of like paragon of virtue. And the vamp could in a way do all of the things that the heroine couldn't do. And there's so many movies where the vamp really has a very good author back role, and she's actually the more interesting person to watch because she's written like an actual human being, where the heroine is written like this very strange cardboardy person. Like, who among us can relate to a Suraj Bajate heroine? I know I can't. I mean, like, it's crazy. It's like, who are these women? But then when I see Bindu plotting and hatching like a plot, and she's just being wicked and kind of reveling in her like nastiness and pettiness, I'm like, yeah, I can be your friend. I get it. I got you,
Yeah. I mean, just there's different dimensions, but I definitely could, get more excited when I see, the item number start. So versus the heroine.
I was watching this video with a professor who I'll put it in the description for people, who's talking about Helen. And one of the things that she talks about is how important color film was to Helen's career. Did either of you watch this video? And
I watched a different interview where she said something similar, but go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, so she's talking about how Helen, existed obviously in black and white films and is amazing in those, but once color film came in, they could code her as white and give her blonde hair and blue contacts.
Right.
And how that kind of really cemented her role. And obviously she was half white, but in black and white, it's much harder to tell. And I thought that was fascinating. Because obviously we've all seen Helen play Anglo characters, or at least Christian characters, a bunch of times, but to actually think of her as a white woman, who eventually gets replaced, of course, by actual East European women who are now doing, who are the backing dancers in a lot of songs and stuff. But I thought that was fascinating. I've never thought about the role of color in specifically Helen's career and how well she transitioned, because not everybody made a great leap into color, especially directors, right, who didn't really do as well in color. But Helen, because she just became this even more malleable canvas, I think, for people. And when we think about what Helen was saddled with to wear, right? First of all, she moves like the wind and a hummingbird, and she's amazing, but she often has these gigantic headpieces, skirts that are really heavy looking, even though they're short, jewels on her tights, like
fabulous,
batshite makeup.
Right.
Which I think one of the documentaries talks about. Didn't she do her own makeup quite a bit?
Yeah.
You just, she is going for it. And yet she is so, there's always a grace to her that's absolutely amazing.
I was watching the Helen documentary. So for those of you who are interested, it's actually on YouTube. It's called Helen, Queen of the Notch Girls or something, and it's produced by Merchant Ivory. And in that, she, they show her at her makeup table, and she talks about how when she travels abroad, like when she goes to Europe and stuff, she stocks up on makeup and like feathers and crystals and stuff, and she shops for contact lenses. They're like blue, green, and then I was also, and she said like she primarily likes to do her own makeup and her own hair because that way she has more control over it, and she has like a very specific look she wants to portray. I was also watching an interview on this TV show. It's called the Kapil Sharma Show. It's mostly very cringe, but what I do like about the show is that they invite some of the yesteryear stars. So I saw an episode also on YouTube where Wahida Rahman, Asha Parekh and Helen, who are really close friends in real life, had all come on the show. And one of the questions that Kapil Sharma asks is, all of you started out in black and white and then transitioned to color. So what was that experience like? And both Wahida Rahman and Asha Parekh said that they hated it, because Wahida said that when they transitioned to color cinema, they used to use a lot of lights, and the lights were really hot on the face, and they had to keep dipping chamois leather in ice cold water and dab it on their face before a take, because it just got so hot. And especially back then, there was no such thing as air conditioning in the studios, so it was just really brutal. And Asha Parekh was talking about the first color film that she did, where the camera was in front of her and there were these lights backlighting her and I guess lighting the hero's face. And at the end of the shoot, when she went home, she saw that her entire back was like red and almost burnt from the lights. And Wahida said that when she would be offered a color movie, because not everyone was still doing color movies, it was like a bit of a transitory era, when they would offer her film and she used to be like, is it going to be black and white or color? And then when they would say color, she'd be like, darn it. So both those actresses were talking about how much they hated acting in color films in the beginning, but Helen said she loved it. And Kapil Sharma was like, really? Why did you like it? And she said, because I looked my best in color. And they showed this little collage of all of the outfits she did. And I hadn't realized this, but a vast majority of her outfits were bright red or like coral, like, really bright colors. And she said that she was so particular about her outfits and the colors, and she wanted it to be really fantastical. And the headdresses, she said she would have all these like feathers and everything. And she said that in color, I looked amazing because my outfits really popped and I looked my best, and that was my priority. And I was like, oh my God, I love you even more.
Yeah, no, I think that's on point. And like, when you look at some of those costumes, like you're saying earlier, like we live in, the times we live in now, there's Amazon, there's stretch fabrics, there's all this stuff. Even you're talking about the stockings with the little gemstones on them, but just thinking about all the work and like craftsmanship and like makeup has advanced. So it's like what they were working with, and that the fact that she was like that, I was shining, in that situation, it like just, it makes my heart flutter. So
yeah.
Good intel.
When I think of like a heroine who actually managed to make a tiny little bit of an inroad into that vampy world, the only one I could think of actually was Sharmila Tagore, because she did that amazing cabaret number, which is one of my favorites, Zubi Zubi Zalembu, from An Evening in Paris. And it's so fabulous. And she has the silver tights and the silver and the turquoise headpiece and everything. And I thought she did a really good job. And this is from an actress who actually was not a good dancer at all. I mean, no one associates Sharmila Tagore with good dancing, but she really brought the oomph and the coquetry. And I just thought she was really good in that dance. And then I was racking my brains. I was like, who else can I think of that is not technically a vamp, that was technically a heroine, but who did good in that arena? And I couldn't think of anyone.
I think Parveen Babi does. But you have to come like 15 years forward or, later, right? So that as we all know, like the vamp declines as women, as heroines get to do more. And again, this interview I was watching talks about how much it had to do with economic liberalization and clothing marketing. And like you had to have the heroine in more different kinds of clothes. And so therefore she had to do more, she could take on vampy things in order to sell the clothes. Basically, right. I mean, not as formal marketing tie-ins, but that the idea of what a heroine wore changed as economics in India changed and markets changed, which I thought was super fascinating. But by the 90s, the vamp is gone. And women like Parveen Babi and Zeenat Aman get to do more. In the 80s, are doing more of the bad girl things. And I think as modern women ourselves, we're probably glad that the collapse of the heroine and the vamp can go into the one and the same, right? With the, she can still be a good girl and have a sexy dance. It's okay. But I do miss the vamp. And I love when I watch a film that has an interesting negative to neutral woman character in it, especially if she's sort of heroine age, or if she's played by someone who is often a heroine, but is taking a turn as something a little bit different. again, this is the I hate Katrina Kaif podcast apparently, but I think she's awful, but I enjoy her in her item songs, right? So that's someone where I feel like, and I feel like her item song, she doesn't even have a character. She's just an item song, right? But I can see that working well if she ever wanted to do that, give her a very limited role where she gets to be negative. And I think there's a lot of women who would do really well at it, but it's really fun when someone major appears basically in an item song, especially if that item song is given a little bit of narrative in some way, right? So it's not just a song appearance. It does actually, it's a little bit of a role. And I'm trying to think of good examples of that. And there aren't very many, but whenever you could get a movie with a really good gangster's girlfriend or something like that. Like I recently watched Ux, which is a kind of remake of Face Off mixed with some other things. And Ravina Tandon plays the gangster's girlfriend, and it's a significant role, but she's basically a vamp, I think, in that movie.
Okay.
Have either of you seen that one?
No, I have.
And that's from the early 2000s. But that one kind of stood out to me as a more recent vamp, although that's obviously 20 years old, so it's not that recent anymore.
I have like mixed feelings about the whole. So I agree wholeheartedly with you about how I'm glad that afterwards, like earlier it was like that whole like Madonna horror complex, right? You had like the heroine was a Madonna, and then the girl who did the cabaret was clearly the very bad girl. And then later on that kind of like collapsed, and then the heroine started doing more, and then she started getting shades of gray, and then she also started doing those dances and stuff like that. Like, Ravina Tandon in Tip Tip Barsa Pani in Mohara comes to mind. She was so hot. Madhuri did a whole bunch of songs where they were very like racy, but she was clearly an A-list superstar. But one thing I miss about the vamp era is that when you have heroines doing these numbers, unless it's someone like Madhuri who really can act and also dance at the same time, and she can be super seductive, you're left with heroines who are not good at it. Like, to give you an example, we have the original Dawn where there's Helen and Amitabh Bachchan, and she's doing Ye Mera Dil Pyar Ka Deewana. Lunchy is laughing because I was venting to her because I was like, the temerity of Kareena Kapoor. And I like Kareena Kapoor.
Me too.
But then, they like remade Dawn, and then they had her in a golden outfit doing Ye Mera Dil, and I was like, no, do not. How dare you? You must not. How could you? I was so offended because I was like, you do not have even a fraction of Helen's talent in your little. She has more talent in her little pinky than you. Stop it. So I think what happened was then you now have these heroines where it's like Kareena Kapoor can act, but she's not seductive. She doesn't know how to dance. Can we just have her act and not do the dance and leave the dancing to the people who can actually dance? Like maybe have Malaika Arora dance. Like she is great. I love her in Chaya Chaya. I love her in Muni Badnaam Hui. She's really good at that. So I think, yes, I like that the heroine started having all these shades to them and they could do all of these, but unless it's a heroine who actually can dance and be seductive, like Madhuri, a lot of times the other heroines, they just disappoint me because they don't know what they're doing. And then I'd rather watch an old song with Helen or Bindu or Arna Irani or whoever, So I don't know. I just don't like even Katrina. Like I'm not some fan of hers. I don't think she can act. She can't even speak Hindi for the life of her. But she is a good dancer. I will give her that. But again, you look at the older cabaret numbers and then you watch her in Chikni Chameli or Sheila Ki Jamani, and it's just not as good.
No comparison.
So it's like, what are you contributing? I would rather have some up and coming person who has no interest in acting, who has no intention of becoming a heroine, but she can dance her tail off and she's seductive and she's sexy and she can just own the screen. I would rather that you give her a few songs to do. So I don't know.
Who I love. Who I love these days, and I think I've seen her in more Telugu films than Hindi, is Mumaith Khan. I'm not pronouncing her name right, I'm sure, but she was in Magadira, for example. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I mean, I've watched that movie 1,000 times. So.
She's the one in the shipyard.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
She's
I was gonna look her up, but I didn't check
spectacular.
it out.
And I have seen her lead
Right.
entire films, but they were like snake movies. So I suspect she's not considered A-list. I don't actually know, and she's
A-list in my heart. Yeah.
she's totally,
Oh.
she's in one of the Munabai movies, I think, right? Isn't she in the first Munabai movie? She's fantastic. I feel like she might be the best we have in terms of a kind of a vamp these days. It makes me think like, oh, maybe I should go exploring for vamps in Telugu cinema.
Yeah.
If they're kind of gone in Hindi, I don't know. But yeah, I agree. Like not everybody is equally talented at this kind of thing.
Well, I think too, and like I don't want to get in over my head, but whenever like just in my free time when I'm looking at Helen videos or like research, before we met for this, like, you always see in the comments like about Helen, oh, she was never vulgar, always so much class. And I'm like, because then you like, see people's responses to like Chikni Chameli or any of these, Mundi Badnam, whatever.
Right.
Oh, it's so dirty, so vulgar. And I'm like, what's like if we go back in time and I was thinking, maybe it's a talent thing or like because there's this separation of the Madonna whore thing, but I'm like, this can't be real. Like I need to talk to some people's like parents and like uncles and be like,
right.
I'm sure people weren't like, we love Helen, like it's not vulgar at all. I mean, it's pretty risque.
If I remember right, that documentary about her is fascinating in many ways. One of them is that documentary has utter disdain for the popular Hindi film industry, and yet it adores Helen. The makers of that film love Helen, as they should. But it's fascinating that they see her as this like gem in a field of muck, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of which is what you're talking about, like in a way, like Helen. But at the time, I too am curious, and I should, as some listeners know, I have access to old film fairs through the university library, and I should go in there and look and see, like, are people, about Helen, like shaming makers for putting her in and whatever. I mean, if they were, it didn't make any difference because she has an absolutely epic career, married into film royalty, and is doing fine as far as we know. So like
I think too, we don't really know, like she's very private about her life, and versus like stars nowadays, we know everything. Maybe that's not their choice, but it just always kind of like I get a little like tweaked out when I see that, because I'm like, was it really, like, are you really just shaming women nowadays in film?
Yes.
I mean, I love them all, but it's just I wanted your take on that.
It's interesting too, because I remember I was watching one of the old interviews of Sharmila Tagore and Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudy, and she was talking, I mean, this is just something she said where she was like, he is very calm and he's unflappable and he basically doesn't care what I do, and that's one of his best qualities. And she was talking about how when Evening in Paris released, and when that song came out, the cabaret number, and she's dressed very scantily in it, and not just that, but I think she was also featured on the cover of Filmfare, if I'm not mistaken, in a bikini. And then she'd also done a song in a bikini with Shami Kapoor in that same movie. I think that's the song Asman Se Aaya Farishta, where she's like jet skiing or whatever, water skiing, whatever it's called. And there was like this huge controversy in India, and people were like, oh my God, like this is literally the niece of like Rabindranath Tagore, and she comes from the Tagore family, and how could she do this? And she was dating Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudy at the time, I think. I don't think they were married yet. And she was like in panic mode because she was like, oh my God, I'm getting all these criticism. What have I done? Should I be regretting this? And he was like apparently very chill about it. And he was like, yeah, so. And that kind of made her feel better. So my point being, I'm sure that a lot of these people were slut shamed back then. I bet you that Helen was slut shamed back then. I bet you Bindu was. I bet you Arna Irani was. I'm sure that there's a fair bit. Arna Irani has actually spoken about this. I bet you that there was a fair bit of sexual harassment that they experienced in the studios. Yeah, I don't think Helen has spoken about it because, as Lanchi said, she was, I think, a more private person. But I think people are kind of looking at them sort of with rose-colored glasses now. Mm-hmm. And I think Sharmila Tagore, because she was a heroine and she was from like such a sort of celebrated family, probably got the least brunt of it. But I'm pretty sure all of these women were had to experience a lot of wrath back then. And I think there's definitely some hypocrisy at play where now they're like, oh, Chikni Chameli is vulgar and Muni Badnaam, who is vulgar, and all of these things are vulgar. But we like those songs. They're not that different.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you're complaining about. Now, I will still complain about modern songs because I don't think they're as good, but that's an aesthetic choice because I don't think the dancing is up to par, but that's not.
Or even just the music itself. I mean, there's
the music itself. Yeah, exactly.
The composer and whatnot.
In that interview that I was watching, the Kapil Sharma show episode, there was something funny where he was asking Wahida Asha. It's a fun episode. I don't know if it has subtitles though, because that show is almost entirely conducted in Hindi. But he asked all three of these yesteryear heroines about their fan encounters, and they're talking about like obsessive fans they had. So Wahida talked about this architect who kept sending her fan mail, and he wrote her letters, like 4-page long letters every day, where he was like, marry me, I'll build you something to rival the Taj Mahal. I'm an architect, you know. And then Asha Parekh spoke about this man who camped out outside her house, and he was like basically like just always there, and she had to call the cops and have him arrested. And then they asked Helen, and they were like, okay, what about you? Did you have any fans, or opposite, were there people who didn't like you? And she said, I'll tell you who my biggest fan was. And Kapil Sharma was like, who? And she says, Asha Bhosle. And apparently Asha Bhosle was such a huge fan of Helen, and she sang most of Helen's songs anyway. She apparently said to Helen, I wish I was a man because I would have married you in a heartbeat, which I was like, same, Asha,
Fanfic,
same. I would have also married Asha for that matter, but yes.
Wow.
You know who we haven't talked about yet, and shame on us, Silk Smitha.
Oh, yes.
So she, I think many of her roles would qualify as a vamp, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah, for
yes,
sure.
she does item songs, but she plays a lot of full-on characters.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the amazing, you know, biographical film about her with Vidya Balan, who fully embraced
Loved
the
it.
version of that
Yeah,
was
so
written
good.
and like, you know, I don't think Vidya would have had a whole career as a vamp, even if those existed in her era. But I say that like it's over. I hope her era is not over, but like we know how these things go. You know, here's an example of an amazing actor having a grand time doing all that stuff and doing things I think most of us probably were surprised she could do, right? In that film. And so I don't know, like I'll praise Silk Smitha as well, and that I suspect really difficult life that she led, but like she's amazing too.
She's amazing too.
So amazing.
I loved Vidya Balan's monologue in that movie where, you know, it's at the award show, whatever, and she's talking about the hypocrisy of society and how people will celebrate you, but at the same time they have so much disdain for you. I think she really like sank her teeth into it. And I will admit that when I first heard that they were going to make that movie Dirty Picture, I was like, okay, I don't know if Vidya Balan can pull this off, because until then, everything I'd seen her in, like especially in Parinita, I just associated her with like, you know, like a classic damsel in distress, very pretty, and you know, things like that. I didn't know she could like bring it, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised. Like especially if you see her in the songs, and she's so like wicked in her scenes with Nasir. I mean, she really did that role incredibly well. I can't think of anyone else.
Like she's really acting in the songs, and I feel like that's something that must be extremely hard to do, to dance and act at the same time. And of course, many kinds of dance are also acting. I know that, but like to see, that seems to be a very special skill set that not everybody has, but that is really called on in Indian popular cinema, obviously. But yeah, she's just so good.
No, that was I need to rewatch. That was
it holds up really well. I think I rewatched it during the pandemic at some point, and I was pleasantly surprised at how well it really does hold up.
I think where acting is concerned, like acting during the songs especially, I think Aruna Irani was probably the best at emoting. She was so good in her, she could really convey like vulnerability, sadness, humiliation. She like so many different things. I even love this song of hers. It's not as famous as her others, but you know the song in Bobby where she's making fun of Rishi Kapoor because he's engaged to the girl who's like a little off or simple, and it's that song Pasa, and she's so gleeful in it.
It's a pink. Does she have a pink dress?
No, she's wearing the sequin dress, and
Okay.
she's the fiance I think is in a pink dress,
Okay,
but
okay.
Erna Irani's in this like sparkly sequin number, and she's basically laughing at Rishi Kapoor's plight because he's been betrothed to this girl who's clearly simple, and she's essentially laughing at him throughout, and she's so gleeful and mean, and I very much enjoyed that.
She's so good.
So,
she's so good.
Lunchy, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Helen or Vamps how you discovered Hindi cinema?
In a roundabout, well, it's kind of how I took a deep dive. Like originally I saw like one weekend, like TBS played like a Shah Rukh Khan film and I was like, what is this? But like when I lived in Williamsburg, there was a really good, it's called Videology. I don't know if it's still there, but they had like all these international films and I picked up Bombay Talkie. And that has the typewriter, you know, when Helen and Shashi are dancing on the typewriter, and that had the B-side of the DVD was that not so great mini doc on Helen. And from that point, I was like, who is this woman? And this was like, you know, early, you know, whatever, 2006, 7. So like things have changed since then. So like I'd go to Jackson Heights and get like, just basically like what movies she had items in just to watch, you know, her dance. So that was kind of like where it all started, and then watching like just what was in the theater. So blah blah blah. But it, yeah,
like when you put in a movie, or like back when I was trying to blaze through as much Shashi Kapoor filmography as I could, and you'd get that and Helen, and you'd be like, yes.
Yeah.
And so many of these songs, not just her, but I mean, I think she might be the most prolific. Everyone knows certain ones of hers, but she's got literally hundreds, it seems like, of others. And every single one of them is well worth watching, even if I don't really, you know, I can't name them for you. Like any film that she's in, I'm so happy to see her. I know something great is coming, even if she doesn't really have a role and it's just a song, you know, she brings her A game every single freaking time. Every
she never
time.
phones it in.
No.
And one thing I noticed is that I've seen a lot of films where it's like when they're directing the movie or when they're directing the filmy songs, like the duets or whatever, it's okay. Like they've done a decent job directing it, I guess, and the lighting is fine and the choreography is fine. But then you see a Helen dance in that same movie and you clearly see that the director has upped his game, and then the lighting is better and the dancing is better. Like everything just seems more put in place. And I wonder if that was like, they were like, okay, this is going to be the Helen number. This is going to bring the people. They're going to watch this. They're going to talk about this. We got to make sure this is awesome. Because you do hear in like even in the black and white era where there were certain songs that they definitely focused on. Like I was watching the Madhubala song, Aiye Meherban, which is like in that little like speakeasy kind of a club. And I read about how Gurudat himself did all the lighting for that song, and he made sure that everything was in place and all of that stuff. So I feel like even with the Helen numbers, I don't know if this is true, but this is just an observation, that I feel like they put extra effort because they were like, okay, she's going to be there, so we got to make sure everybody's on their A game and it's going to be spectacular. So there are films that you'll see where overall the movie is just kind of like,
yeah,
and the songs are and the direction is okay, and then you see her number and it's like all great, but the rest of the movie is middling. And I wonder if that was a conscious choice because they were like, we have to ace this.
Yeah, it's like the single. It's like that's the reason people, you know, they want to see it. It's like the big highlights of that. I think that makes sense.
I was wondering about that. Like, I mean, we all know about songs coming out in advance of a movie and helping promote it, but in the Helen era of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, maybe, did they show songs on TV before a film released? And if so, would it have been her songs? And I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know about the TV. Well, first of all, back in those days, not everyone even had a TV. I mean, in the 60s especially, it was the case that in the neighborhood, one specific person had the TV. And then if they were going to show like an important cricket match, or if it was like a really good movie or whatever, everybody would gather there to see it. So it almost became like a communal TV. But I do know that, like, for example, when my dad and my uncle were growing up, this was in the 50s, they used to listen to the radio a lot, and on the radio they would have these, because it was all India radio, and they would play certain hit songs from movies, and the song would become a hit even though the movie hadn't even released yet. So for
Sure.
example, Helen's number, Mera Naam Chun Chun Chu, that was like a huge hit. And my uncle used to talk about how my dad was really little when that song came out, but anytime someone was playing the transistor and it was Mera Naam Chun Chun Chu, my dad, who was really little, would go running in search of that song and sit in front of the transistor and not move until he had finished listening to that song. And so that definitely used to drum up a lot of curiosity, where people would be like, oh, this amazing hit song that we like is going to come in this movie. And there were definitely people who went to see that film because of that song, not necessarily because they cared about the script or whatever.
But like the video, the visual production of that does not enter into that power.
Right.
Yeah, it's
But maybe
interesting.
there was an assumption, I don't know, maybe there was an assumption that the song sounds so good and the beat is so good and the rhythm is nice and supposedly it has Helen in it, so probably the visuals are going to be worth it. Maybe they just assumed that. So I don't know.
I love imagining that she had enough power to make sure her sequences looked great. I kind of doubt that that's true. I doubt that it was her, but I'd love to think that it was her. I love the idea of Helen as the most powerful woman in Bollywood. That's a great, as she should be. All praise Helen. But it's hard to imagine. Are there any women now that if you could like magically give them a proper vamp role, like who would you like to see sink their teeth into some of this stuff?
I love Tabu.
I mean, she's certainly been a femme fatale in things like
she has, and she really does that so well. She's just, first of all, she has the face of an angel. She's so beautiful. She's so mysterious, and she never overdoes it. Like she always plays her roles. So I mean, it's Tabu. Like, what can I say about her that hasn't been said? But all of the femme fatale kind of roles that I've seen of hers have been very, very gratifying to watch. But I feel like I don't associate Tabu with any dance numbers. A, because she's not fond of dancing. And the only film in which she really did quite a bit of dancing was Chandni Bar, in which she played like a bar dancer. But that was not like a vampy role at all. But I would love to see Tabu attempt something like that, because I think she could bring it. Like she would kill it. Maybe like if she had a script where she plays like an aging cabaret dancer or something, and like, something like that would be really cool. Maybe Konkana Sen Sharma could write and direct it. That would be cool, right? Guys, use your Twitter before it shuts down. Use your Twitter.
Dear Konkana, please make this film. What do you think, Lunchi? Who do you want to see? Who do you want to see?
But I was thinking even Konkana, like for some reason she popped into my head the other day.
She's great.
She's great, but I was like, and then I'm like, would she? I don't know, a vamp. I don't know. I just think there's something there. I haven't seen her lately, but I don't know. I have to give it some more thought. But when this conversation started, I was like, oh, is that weird if I say Konkana? But she could also direct. So
Ronnie could be Ronnie. I mean, Ronnie can dance.
That's my
beautiful. She's seductive. Has she played a femme fatale though, Beth? I can't remember.
Well, I mean, she plays a sex worker in Sawaria.
Yes.
I've blocked that film out, I must admit. So I don't really remember what that role was. I remember it being pretty and like blue, but I don't really remember much beyond that. But I feel she could certainly do it.
She could do it.
And I feel like, getting Mrs. Aditya Chopra to come in for an item song is like probably she might be willing to come in for that. But she's too old.
Yeah.
She's our age, so she's too old. But I feel like, so I have a soft spot for Vani Kapoor, which I'm not sure I can justify exactly, but I do think she's a fun dancer. I feel like she could probably do it if it was a fairly limited role. I mean, I don't think she's a bad actor. I think she's fine. She hasn't had a whole lot of chance yet to do much. I mean, she basically really a vamp in war, right? Basically. Right. Except it's very Heart of Gold.
Yeah. She was very good in Chandigarh Kare Aashiki. She's definitely someone I want to see more of.
She was good.
But don't you guys feel like to be like a vamp, you need to have a lot of oomph? And I feel like so many of the people we have nowadays have no oomph. Although I will say, I was pleasantly surprised by Shraddha Kapoor in that recently released song from Bhedia, the Tumkeshwari song. Did you see the video?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Shraddha Kapoor is hot in that song. It's like 25 seconds and she completely steals the show because the song is actually picturized on Varun Dhawan and Kriti Sanon because Kriti is the heroine of Bhedia or whatever. But because it's part of that like Maddock, like horror comedy universe, and because Shraddha was in Stree, she has this like 25-second appearance in Tumkeshwari. She was so good in it. She was hot. We know she dances really well. She looked beautiful. And I was like, what happened to Shraddha Kapoor? Because she was always cute girl next door, but she is not cute girl next door in this song. You guys have to see it.
Ooh, yeah,
She was
yeah,
hot.
wrote it down.
Okay. Huh. I feel like when you said oomph, it made me think of, now this is someone I haven't seen for a while, but I always really liked. What about Huma Qureshi?
Can she dance though?
I have no idea. It was funny, you both
Okay.
cocked your heads like dogs, like,
Yeah.
let's think about this. But I like, remember how sultry she is in Dead Ishkia?
Yes.
Like,
she
feel like
also
maybe
did
she
that
could do it.
song in Gangubai Kathiawadi, that Kawali that she did, where she's like sitting.
Yeah,
I forgot what it was called.
that's
But
right.
she did that too. Yeah.
All right, we've
I
got
don't
to
know.
petition all these ladies on Twitter.
Well, like
we're missing the oomph. We need more oomph.
yeah. Well, this
We
is
don't want any more vanilla.
What is oomph in 2022 anyway, right? Like when everyone's doing everything on social media or their Instagram or whatever for no reason
There's not
whatsoever.
much oomph. It's
Like,
all vanilla nowadays.
but there's
You
still
have
plenty
to
of
start
room for
watching
there's a lot of
old
room for bad
movies.
women. Come on, we can do it.
That's a good quote. Yeah, no, but yeah, I don't know what that is. Like, what's that missing thing? And I don't know if it is like being jaded and living in the time we live in now. And it's easier to look back at things that are like 20, 30, 40 years older and be like, oh, they had the, the thing. So I don't know. That's a hard one.
Well, I feel like our categories have so collapsed, but I bet the categories back then were not as strict as we like to think they are either, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, obviously real life and films are different, but even in films, it's probably not quite as simple as vamp and good girl, heroine. If you start looking and digging, I mean, obviously that's the general stripe, but like,
Right.
I bet there's more to it than that, which is why some of the people who start to break down these divisions are interesting.
You know who I just thought of had tremendous oomph and gave us some extremely sexy and sensuous numbers was Urmila.
Oh yeah.
She gave, like, especially in Rangila, like Hai Rama and then Tanha Tanha Yahan Pe Jeena. I mean, she was hot. She in Dod. I mean, all of those songs. I just wish she had like achieved the superstardom that I think she deserved, but she was like super umphy. Having said that, the roles that she did, she wasn't a vamp. She just, I mean, the numbers were sensuous and sexy, but she wasn't exactly like a femme fatale or anything. She
had kind of an item song in that movie Blackmail with Irfan Khan from a couple of years ago. She shows up in a kind of bar song sequence, but yeah, I mean, it's been so long. She would be good.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm gonna forget her name. That other woman that RGV really liked, who's in Notch.
Antara Mali?
Yeah, I don't know where she is these days, but she's an interesting dancer and certainly has oomph, I would say. But
now here's an interesting question for y'all, because I know that the vamp and all of those things were clearly conceived of for the male gaze, and so therefore all of the vamps were women. But did we ever have anything like a male vamp?
A mamp?
A mamp, yes. Were there any mamps?
I mean,
okay, so how do we define that? Like a man who's not the main villain, he's like an item villain?
Yes, like he's just hot and women get to admire how wonderfully hot he is, but he's not the hero. So you can't talk about Hrithik Roshan because yes, he's hot, but
that's
he was
what I
always
was going
the
to say.
hero.
And we can't talk about Dirty Disco because
no,
he's the hero.
Was there no one? I feel like there was maybe no one.
It must have happened here. Well,
maybe John Abraham for a hot minute or Arjun.
I mean,
Rampal.
again, he's the hero in as much as this film has a hero. But Lunchy, we just did an episode where we were talking about movies we love that other people hate, and we talked significantly about Aya. And of course, because that film is completely from the point of view of the woman's desire, Prithviraj, but he's not a villain in any way. He's just the guy that she's in love with. But visually, he has some sort of vamp type role.
I think the closest we ever had to a vamp, I love this new word that Lunchy has coined, was in the indie pop scene in India, not so much in movies, but like, for example, I remember Milind Soman was like the mamp for a while because he was in that Alisha Chennai song, Made in India, and he was bare-chested and extremely hot. Fun fact, Milind Soman I don't know if he still lives, he lived in my mom's neighborhood, and he used to go running in a park near her house, Shivaji Park, for those of you who know Bombay. And he used to go to Baskin Robbins, and I discovered from an interview that his favorite ice cream flavor was blackberry. So I used to go to the Baskin Robbins, and I would basically like hang around over there with the intention. I had like a whole plan. I was like, if Milind Soman comes all sweaty from a run, then I will just casually go up to the counter and be like, hello, I would like 2 blackberry cones, please. And then just offer him to be like, oh my God, you like blackberry too? I would never have guessed. So this was a fantasy of mine, but it never took place. But that's what fantasies are for.
Fun fact, I received a check signed by him once because I did some freelancing for a publication that he was, part of the management of. Ooh. And I was like, no one in the United States that I know in real, like in my day-to-day life will appreciate this, but like I have a check signed by Milind Soman.
This is why we all need to have filmy friends, because no one in my professional life would understand the story either. I cannot tell people how I used to hang around the Baskin Robbins in Bombay looking for sweaty Milind Soman. Only Beth and Lunchy will get me. This is why these friendships are important, you guys.
I feel like your setup here is perfect for a film song, right? Like you're standing there imagining with your ice cream cone, and then like,
and it's melting, and then I see him, and maybe he drops it. There's so many ways this song could be picturized. It would be so good. There could be Helen doing like a little cabaret number. It would be wonderful.
She'll do her little cameo. Yeah. Wow. It's all coming together.
It is. We should all write a script. We need to like get together and like every Sunday and like write a script.
Nobody's going to make my 70s style movie. Like that's what I want to write. That's the only thing I'm qualified to write.
We just need to make rich friends, Beth. Don't lose hope. Be optimistic. We'll just make some rich friends and we'll get them to bankroll our movie. Where's Uday Chopra these days? Let's get him to bankroll our script.
Yes. There's this old hotel in my town that was a faux medieval kind of looking place. And I got to go in it. It's being renovated now, but I got to go in it once before it was. And I was like, oh, this is where I'm filming my 70s movie right here. Because it's got like a big banquet room with like big chunky wooden chairs. And it had all this like a taxidermy bear. For my fellow Midwesterners on the call, this was a Joomers, if anyone knows what that is. But yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be.
But now it'll be all renovated. And
I know. So I didn't get my chance. But, if anyone wants to make a 70s style indie film, you know where I am.
Let's put it out into the universe. I'm from California. I'm allowed to say things like that. And let's manifest our vision and make it come true. I'm so sick of that word, you guys. Like everyone keeps saying manifesting, and I want to punch them. Is that bad?
I mean, it's just my inner real, so
people just use it all the time, and I'm just like, I just look at them like, okay, sure, but
blink, yeah.
Okay, if you could manifest a piece of vamp costuming for yourself, what would it be? I mean, we could also just go on Amazon or go to Michael's and get the supplies and make it ourselves, but
I want to wear Parveen Babi's golden sequined number from Jawani Jaane Man Haseen Dilruba. That would, with the ringlets in my hair and the fire in my heart. What about you, Lunchy?
Do you know the song Pia Tu Ab To Aja, where she's like drinking and like she's running after that dude, and then her like dress gets caught, and I mean, it's like the oldest trope, and she twirls like that ensemble, because you've got the 2 outfits in one, and I just think it's utilitarian, it's adorable.
It's very burlesque.
Yes, because I was able to recreate my fantasy, my Helen outfit already.
That's
so
right,
that would be like my
this.
second one. Yeah. That's number 2 for my maybe my 50th birthday, I'll do
Please
that
invite.
We'll all come celebrate with you.
Yes.
No, not invite. We'll just gate crash, Beth. That's what we do.
Please.
Vamps don't wait for invitations. We just go.
No, we just show up. We'll all karaoke to all our favorite numbers.
Please, this is my dream.
I just realized I said Sean when I meant Namak Halal, so please do not at me. I did misspeak.
No, it's fine. Okay, tell us your outfit.
Yeah,
Beth.
what's yours?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be cultural appropriation-y, but I do love a lot of Aruna Irani's like, Indian outfits. I've never worn any of those, obviously, but I do think those are really fantastic, and getting one like made for you to twirl about in does sound really great. But if I had to go for a more Bindu-y, Helen-y sort of thing, yeah, like any of those. I mean, what's it like to wear tights, fishnets with gems on them? It sounds really uncomfortable, but kind of amazing. So yeah. I mean, I cannot think of a garment that is less me. Like that is so not me, but it would be really fun to experiment for half an hour.
Exactly.
We should have like an annual holiday. It's called the Vamp Day. And basically everybody dresses up in their favorite vampy outfit and just behaves vampy all day. And they smoke and they drink in their potty mouths and they're just like bad girls.
Can we have a slumber party too?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like bring our outfits together. That would be so much
yes.
fun.
We should have a slumber party, and all viewers and listeners of this podcast are invited, and they can all come and we can all have a great time and we'll just enjoy ourselves.
Do each other's hair, put each other's wigs on. Yeah, it'll be great. I can't wait.
Put some glitter on our faces. It'd be so much fun, you guys.
Can't wait.
Okay, so on that note, thank you for coming on our show and having so much fun with us, Lunchy. If our viewers and listeners have also fallen in love with you like we have, please tell them how they can find you if you want to be found.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I'm Luncheroni on most things, so I'll see you on the internet, I suppose. But thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yay. And then y'all know how to communicate with us. We have the Twitter for as long as it's still around. We have Twitter, we have Facebook. You can write YouTube comments. I read and respond to all of those. And the really nice ones, I screenshot and send to Beth. And I'm like, look, our viewers and listeners really like us.
Please put your favorite Vamp songs in the comments and we will make a mega playlist, because that I think we all need for like mood improvement moments. And given that the US election is happening as we record this, we might need that real soon. So please leave us your
and winter is
songs.
also on its way. And so we will need the sequins and glitter to brighten us up. So we should definitely do this Vamp playlist that people can listen to on their morning commute and whatnot. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. Please write us your comments. If you have any suggestions for ideas for future episodes, please let us know. And thanks for watching Filmi Ladies.
Thank you. Bye.